Welcome to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, brought to you by Pilma. This podcast helps lead lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Here is your legal marketing expert and host, Ken Hardison.
Well, hello, everyone. This is Ken Hardison, and welcome to another episode of Grow Your Law Firm. And today we have the honor and privilege of having Chris Dreyer, who is the CEO and Director of SEO at Rankings.io, law firm search engine optimization company that offers high-quality SEO-driven website design and SEO services for lawyers. Welcome, Chris.
Ken, thanks for having me.
All right. So I want to talk a little bit about, online marketing today, but I want to know your background. Tell us your story. How did you end up starting this? How did you get to where you are today?
It's really interesting. I've always been an entrepreneur to some degree. And when I went to college, I told my parents, I was like, I don't know what I'm going to end up doing, but I'm going to own a business at some point. I was really into sports and basketball, and I got a history education degree, and I was coaching at a high school. And I Googled how to make money online. And that took me down the rabbit hole of digital marketing. And by the end of my second year teaching, I was actually making significantly more revenue doing that than I was teaching. So I went off and I started doing affiliate marketing for Amazon. And I had a site that ranked number one for stained concrete for years, number one for double chin for years. And back then it was, you get a few backlinks, you've put a few landing pages up, you're good to go. And around 2012, the first Penguin algorithm hit. And back then, I wasn't doing things from an evergreen perspective. My content wasn't as good as it should have been. My links weren't as good as they should have been. And my income went from, $15,000, $16,000 a month down to around $2,000. So, and at that time, I wasn't mature enough to be saving, right? So I had to go get a job. And I got a job for a digital agency out of Clayton, Missouri, Power Advocates. And I rose to be their top SEO guy. And from the licks that I took and not doing things from a long game perspective, I knew that I had to change. And so I went that route and eventually started my own agency. And I've had Rankings.io since 2013, but it's really been this journey of discovery through affiliate marketing and then also working at a digital agency in the legal space is where I got today.
So what made you get into lawyers, working SEO for lawyers? Because we can kind of be tough to deal with,
Well, so I always hear that, but I've always had great experiences. And I think that for me, I'm super competitive. If I ranking sites in, home services and these other verticals, it's just not competitive. And I really want to compete at the highest level, and the highest level and in the legal verticals, the PI space, the personal injury space. We were talking previously about this. It's a bloodbath, but I want to compete, right? That's where it's a zero-sum game competing, especially in the SEO space. So there's this sense of satisfaction when my clients rank number one, when we get those results, they sign the big cases. And I also knew that these attorneys were graduating more and more every single day. And that due to that, there was going to be just a demand for expertise just because it was so saturated. So I knew that they would need my help.
Right.
And that's kind of how I got in the legal space.
Yeah. And it is a bloodbath. I run a lot of masterminds, and that's one of the, we got 3 different levels. And it seems that if you have not had if you ain't got an old URL and been doing SEO for years, you really got to struggle with, and it's some of the more competitive markets. I'm not saying that small towns, but places like Atlanta, New York, Charlotte, LA, Houston, Dallas, all the top 50 markets, I would say, TV markets in the nation, maybe even the top 75. It's tough.
It's very tough. And I think one of the things that's not talked about enough is the physical location of where you open your office matters so much. If you're opening up next to a Morgan or one, a Bader Scott or one of these other big players in Atlanta that has an established brand that has a ton of reviews, it's really hard to rank in the map pack. If you maybe locate your office 3 miles west or 5 miles north. It's a completely different ballgame because, how many times have we all went on vacation and we Google what's the best restaurants near me? Well, you're going to see them in your nearest proximity. You're not going to see them 10, 20 miles away. And that's the same for law firms. So it's one of the last things that people consider from a marketing perspective, but it's actually very important when you're trying to establish your firm.
Yeah. And hasn't Google restructure or what they call out a new algorithm or whatever about the maps, about far as they don't go out as far, they don't stretch out as far. Somebody was showing me something where it really has, compressed, I guess, to where, where it might have went out 10 miles, now it's only out 3 miles, or that's just an example. I'm not saying that that's the right distance. I'm just saying it's reduced, it's compressed.
You're exactly right. And I would imagine that it even reduces further. So the rankings significantly diminish, or you have this diminishing returns after about 3 miles. Now that's an average, right? If you're in New York, it may be a mile,
right?
But you get this significant decline. So it really, a lot of times too, you'll have a very established firm. They got a great headquarters, they invested, millions of dollars in this amazing brick and mortar experience. But one of the things they're losing out on is not opening up additional brick and mortars because their maps decline after a certain mile radius.
Yeah. And listen, I will tell you this, what I found is our mastermind members tell us that once they get at the top of the 3-pack, in the first 3, that it just explodes their business. Really more, that's better than PPC because people know that's paid, and, and a lot of our members are really going out and actually going back and looking at their zip codes, where their cases came for the last 3 or 4 years, and saying, okay, I need to go outside here and put another satellite office in a real office, because it's got to be they're renting offices from domestic lawyers or whatever, and actually putting a sign out and getting Google to come in, take the pictures, verify everything. And I got some of them that are like putting 4 or 5 satellite offices. As they do, they go hog wild, but they know how important it is. And I think it's one of the most, that and LSAs, I think, are like the two. And I don't know, do you have much experience? What do you think about that? Even going 4 or 5 off.
So here's the thing that I think is on the cusp, is between the Google screened LSAs at the very top that they just introduced in the last couple of years and the maps. So let's talk about this. The way to rank in the maps, we'll start there, is by relevance, distance, and prominence. Well, relevance is keyword usage, prominence is links and endorsements like that, and reviews. Well, distance is your location. So we touched on that earlier. On the Google screened and LSA, theirs is based upon region, response, and review. Well, the very first one's region, that's location. So if you want to stand a better chance to rank in the maps and Google screen, you have to be aware of your physical proximity and open those additional locations. And I tell our clients, I say, you don't look at it on the P&L as a facilities cost anymore. It's no longer a facilities cost. It is a marketing cost. You have to have this presence in order to show up in this very valuable real estate. Like you said, ranking significantly well drives a ton of cases because there's a lot of intent behind those searches.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, they're always changing. You got to change with it, or don't you get left behind. Something you said about LSAs, and I've noticed this. We've had some of our members that they're doing great, then all of a sudden, bam, they just fall out of the top 2 or 3. And they've actually got up with Google, or got some of their people to get up with Google, and they found out that somehow their call center at night was not answering the phone, or had hang-ups or whatever, and they threw them back at the bottom of the pile, man. And it's like takes some months to get back up there. Have you seen that? Have you seen it?
I have. And Ken, I would like to hear, I'd like to put the question back on you, because personally, listen, and I have never seen the outsourced intake be as successful as the in-house. There's a lot of things that you can outsource and delegate, but for the intake, geez, that response and answering, within the first dial. And it's just so important to Google Screen because, like you said, response is a ranking factor. So if you don't respond, they drop you. I will tell you this. If you're a firm that's had that happen, the first thing that you need to do is you need to go to your Google Screen, and where you pick your categories. Let's say you had your categories really narrow. Let's say it was car, motorcycle, and you just kind of excluded some of those other cases. Open those wide open. Pick all the categories. I understand that pain and suffering and some of these aren't going to generate, the best cases, but you need to get that activity to show Google that you're relevant and start answering the phone quickly. And it will allow you to rank again. And then you can narrow your categories back down. So that is a recommendation that you can take.
Yeah. And I know it's true because we actually had a member out of New Mexico that this happened to them. They opened it up where their usual budget was $5,000. They spent $22,000, and they got loads and loads of calls, but they were answered on time. They put somebody in at night for like the midnight so that the call center wouldn't have to deal with it. And they got their rankings back up and they got back at the top, and they still got enough cases out of that 22,000 that they didn't lose money, but it got them back to the top within like a month. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, because I thought when they were telling me this, I said, man, that was ballsy. But, and I don't know how they figured it out, but I think they talked to somebody and that they told them, you've got to build your back up, that you're reliable and that you'll answer the phone quickly. You got to have so many, because it's all a numbers game to Google, don't you think?
Right.
I mean, they're in it to make the money. And if you're not answering the phone, they're not going to make money. They're going to give it to people that answer the phone. Because if you answer the phone, you got to pay. If you don't answer the phone, they lose that lead. They lost that money.
I'll go a step further, Ken, and you and I both know this, right? If the Google's listening, the firm that has more categories open, they're probably going to show up a little bit more because Google knows they have more opportunities to monetize that potential lead.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a numbers game for sure.
Ken Hardison here, president and founder of PILMA, Personal Injury Lawyers Marketing and Management Association. I want you to mark your calendars for September 7th through the 9th. We're going to have a internet boot camp for lawyers. We call it the Lawyers Internet Domination Boot Camp, and it's going to be virtual, so you don't have to travel. 3 afternoons from 12:30 to 5:30, and if you can't make one of the sessions, you'll get full recordings of every speaker. So here's just some of the samples, some of the things we're going to be covering. Luke Russell is going to talk to you about how to win in the new era of Facebook advertising and how to target when Facebook is regularly reducing targeting options. Seth Price is going to talk to you about the 5 things you need to be doing in SEO to make more money. And I'm going to be talking to you about how to protect yourself and your law firm from cybersecurity attacks. Did you know that they have grown from over 67% in the last 3 years? Tanner Jones will also be talking about how to dominate your local market with agile social media marketing. And we have a special keynote, Dennis Yu, who is the godfather of how to test your Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram ads on $1 a day. It's a secret that he has shared with me and our PILMA friends, and now he's going to share it with you. So if this sounds like something you're interested, go to pilma.org/internet bootcamp, or go to the end of the notes of this presentation. Thanks. Yeah, it goes back to something else. I mean, we were talking about this before, but, we've had some members in our masterminds that have said, like from big cities like New York and LA saying, listen, I'm doing real good. I've been on TV or whatever. I'm doing this and doing that. But what it's going to cost me to get on the first page of Google after all the other stuff on there, and plus the directories, plus I got these competitors over there, these 800-pound gorillas are spending, $40,000, $50,000 a month. They got URLs that are 20 years old. I just don't know if it's worth it for me to do, SEO. I mean, as far as organic, because the cost, they're telling me it's going to cost, $40,000 a month. And a year it'd even get on the first page. And there's no guarantees of that either because of the market they're in. I mean, I'm not saying it's everywhere, but the market that they're in, that's what I'm hearing. And I don't know. I wanted your take on that.
Yeah, and Ken, I would say those agencies that are telling you that 40,000 number are in the ballpark of a lot of these bigger markets. That it just no longer are you going to spend $2,000 to $5,000 a month and try to rank for car accident lawyer. It's just, I don't care where you're at in the U.S. So it just really depends on your market. The size of your market obviously is going to dictate, how competitive it is, but also your practice areas. If you're carving out a new category, a new blue ocean, maybe a sub niche of auto, maybe you really start hitting Uber or Lyft. Maybe you start just really dialed in on motorcycles, and, you kind of take that Law Tigers, speciality. There's some opportunities where you can definitely lower your investment. But if you're going after car accident lawyer, and you're going after personal injury lawyer, and you're in a big metro, it is going to be a large investment to climb to that number one position in Google.
Yeah. So, I mean, what do you tell them? Do you tell them to take that money and put it somewhere else? Like,
Ken, I'm probably the worst salesman in the world. I tell them up front, I'm like, if you want that, this is what it's going to take. And I had a call recently with a Philadelphia prospect, and I said, look, it's going to be $500,000 minimum from where you're at, because some firms come to us and they have a brand, maybe they've been doing TV, radio, and they have an established brand, and it may not be the same type of investment, because I have to see what assets I can use as leverage. The thing that isn't talked, it's not like us SEO guys are just, inflating the price. Here's the thing. Google is introduced to trillions of landing pages, trillions. Google it can't afford to crawl the search engine anymore. They can't crawl every page. So what they have to do is they have to look for signals to crawl a page. The number one signal that they look at still to this day, still to how they differentiate from Yahoo and AOL, is backlinks. And that's their signal to determine if Google should even crawl the page. So a lot of times these new sites, they don't even get crawled. Google doesn't even know that they're there because they're in the mix of a trillion others. So that's why it's increased the cost, because you have to do outreach. You have to get in these directories, which is a whole different level of competition. And that's the name of the game, is getting these endorsements, and these endorsements cost money because it's content.
Yeah. And how about relevant content? Is that still important?
Oh yeah. So content, I think the most overused phrase is content is king. I get nails in the ear when I hear that, because content's not king. Content is table stakes. If you want to rank in Google, you have to have great content. If you want to rank for any keyword phrase, you have to have a relevant page that matches that keyword. So, and the more of those pages you have, the more opportunities you have. Now, those are just opportunities. To get them to rank, you have to get endorsements. They have to, answer consumer intent and be very valuable. And so, yeah, content's the name of the game.
So I was looking at this thing called Jasper. You ever heard of Jasper?
Jasper AI, yeah, of course.
Yeah. What do you think about that for creating content?
Well, Google's came out very publicly and stated that they are very against artificial intelligence and that style of content. The thing that I'll say is there's things that Google says publicly, and there's John Mueller, for example, the things that he says, it's very loosely interpreted, right? You can't do guest posting, but you can do digital PR. It's the same thing, John. It's just content on a website. So, how does Google determine if it was written by AI? I don't know that it can. And I think ultimately, if the content's good and helps the consumer, that's what Google wants ultimately. I think they're just afraid of the proliferation of AI-driven content. But I think if it's serving the consumer, it can be valuable.
Yeah. And so I know some lawyers are trying to put an extra 20, 30 pages a month, and some, Let me ask you this about the backlinks, because, we went to quantity, and then they went to quality. Are they still on quality? Is that what's important? Not the numbers. I mean, the more quality ones, I guess, is better, but instead of having just 1,000, just ridiculously, out these link forms versus having a bunch of, edus, .orgs, newspapers,
Yeah. So there's a lot of different ways to evaluate links. I'll tell you how we do it, kind of like an overview. A lot of times people will go straight to domain rating or domain authority, like these high authoritative links, but those can be manipulated by SEO specialists. I know that there are some unethical SEO specialists. So you can't look at that as a single standalone metric. You have to look at it in combination with another metric. And the metric that we look at is traffic. If the website I'm receiving a link from is healthy and Google favors it, and it has a high DR, then it can be a great backlink. If it just has a high DR but no traffic, it doesn't matter. So we look for those really healthy sites that have a good web presence. And we also, the key thing that we look at is relevancy. Does it make sense that I'm getting a link from this site? If it doesn't make sense, I think it puts you at risk for penalties. I don't think it's an evergreen type of strategy. So I always like to look at relevancy, if the site's being curated, and if it has a healthy organic presence itself.
So where would a PI lawyer go to get, because I know a lot of lawyers are using these scholarships and getting high schools to put it on there and then get the backlink from the EDU because of it. Is that considered relevant?
It could be if they're linking to a scholarship page and then that authority travels other pages. I'll tell you the scholarship campaign, and you can find an article that I wrote in 2015. If you Google Moz scholarship campaign, I wrote one about that tactic. It used to work back in the day because you would get on your Harvard, your Yale's financial aid pages, but you would be listed with 10 other scholarships. Now, when you go there, there's 20,000. So it just dilutes your equity. So those tactics aren't as favorable as they used to be. So what are the things that you can do as a lawyer? The first thing is you need to be in all your associations, all your chamber of commerces. You need to look at who you're strategically, who you have relationships with. Maybe there's a firm that you don't compete with that you could contribute content to them and talk about out-of-state auto accidents. That could be very relevant. You can also answer quote requests from the media through a source called Help a Reporter Out, HARO. That's a very good one. There are some premium directories that are good, hg.org, FindLaw. So here's the way that I look at FindLaw. In some markets, it can be a lead driver because it ranks really well. But in other markets, I look at it as a link source. So if you have a premium profile, it's a good legal link. And those are some tactics. You can also earn links from high quality content. You have statistics and unique studies on your site. And those are a few methods, but really it's the way that you really create this barrier or gap with your competition, because everyone can go do directories, is you have to create content that's different. You have to have different forms of media. So us doing this podcast, and if someone else doesn't do a podcast, we get a link from a podcast interview, right? Or let's say you have a PDF or white paper that gets acquired, or you wrote a book and you get, in these book, you get a link from Amazon and you get these other links. There are ways to get links from the media. It could be even video or different forms of audio. And those combined create kind of this barrier that's hard to replicate for your competition.
Well, I think that's some great advice, man. I have never really thought about the book. I think podcasts are catching on. They've been around forever. I mean, took me a while to catch on, but we're in we're starting our third year, and I love doing them. I mean, because I learn every time I do one of these. I learn because I think I ask what the people out there, the lawyers that I talk to all the time. I know what they're worried about, what they're thinking about, and I hear their questions. So I just ask the questions they're asking me that I don't know the answers to. And we're doing the video too now, because I think, and I want your take on this. This is a lead into my next question is, what do you think about video? Because I think video is becoming more and more with the social media stuff, but also I think it can be very helpful for SEO, but I'm not an expert on SEO, so I'm asking you.
Yeah, so video is incredibly important. We get to build a rapport. I get to see you. I get to see your smiles, your facial, expressions, things like that, your tonality. And when you look at the social media devices that consumers are using now and how it's shifted to Instagram Reels, to YouTube Shorts, and now TikTok, that's the name of the game. Is so many people think about, like, where should I advertise? It's like wherever consumers congregate, wherever they hang out, will be an advertising opportunity. So right now, TikTok, you can get a lot of views on your videos. But the more people that enter, the more saturation occurs. That organic ability that's on TikTok will decrease, and you'll have to start doing pay to play. Back in the day, when you first got on Facebook and you made a post, everybody in your feed, every connection you had would see that post. Now only a small fraction sees that post unless you boost it and combine it with ad spend. Right. So, all these sites, when I think of SEO a lot of times people just think of Google, but take Apple. If you do a search for a podcast, if you have a keyword in your name, you're going to show up. If you have, grow your law firm, you're going to show up for law firm because it's in your podcast name. The same for YouTube titles, the same for TikTok now. And so SEO can be applied to everything.
It's interesting. I had an Australian company call me about 5 years ago and offered me $30,000 for that URL. And I wouldn't sell it. I said, if they think it's worth that much, it really must be worth a lot. I'm going to hold on to it. And I had it for 10 years, but I just, I thought the podcast, that would be a good short title.
Yeah. Fantastic.
And pretty generic too, but you never know what you got. I mean, URLs,
Ken, my podcast was called the Rankings Podcast. Well, rankings, I'm there's ESPN scores, like what is rankings? So I renamed ours to Personal Injury Mastermind, to get personal injury because it's more relevant to my audience. And that's why I did it. It's because the Apple search gives a benefit to the keyword.
Yeah. Well, Mastermind's a big deal right now. I can tell you it's, I just wrote a book on it and launched it out first quarter, and they're popping up everywhere. I mean, there's lawyers, there's a lot of masterminds being formed right now. I started them 18 years ago.
Yeah, you were at the very beginning and really established, PILMA to one of the best masterminds, and now, yeah, they're everywhere.
Yeah, they really are, and it doesn't matter to me as long as people do it, because I've been in masterminds. I'm still in 2 masterminds that have nothing to do with PILMA. It's just businesses and different people. I got coaches. I got another one. I just think you just learn from others. I just think you never know it all. When you think you do, you're in trouble. I promise you.
Agreed.
So I'm always trying to learn something new. All right, we got to finish up here. So number one, anything our listeners that I hadn't covered that you think is important that you want to, impart on our listeners and viewers, and then contact information in case they want to get up with you and pick your brain or hire you.
Yeah. Thank you, Ken. So yeah, anyone that has questions about SEO, feel free to reach out. And, SEO is still a great lead generation source, but you have to have the right strategy and the right investment. That's the name of the game is the right strategy combined with the right investment. And if you want to get in touch with me, I'm most active on LinkedIn. So I'll connect with anyone on LinkedIn. But if you want to visit our website or if you need help with SEO, go to rankings.io.
All right, my friend. Thank you so much for being here with us, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Yeah, Ken, thanks for having me.
All right. Until next time, this is Ken Hardison, dedicated to your success.
You have been listening to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, the podcast that leads lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Go to growyourlawfirm.com to find more ways to market and manage your law firm. Please leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts.